Welcome to EnRich Relationships, a podcast designed to help leaders improve their personal and professional relationships from a father and son team.
We each bring executive corporate experience in both public and private companies, as well as personal experience as brothers, fathers, and sons. I'm Dax Rich.
And I'm Larry Rich, and together we discuss different leadership skills and concepts that will help you at work and at home. Change is a wonderful thing, but it can be a two-edged sword. Don't change important decisions too often or last minute, or you'll lose people. I'll give an example of an organization that has regular leadership meetings with their main management, and they get together and they discuss what they feel is working, and they'll make small tweaks in this meeting just because they have regular ongoing middle management meetings. And they feel like because they have these regularly scheduled meetings, they need to have an agenda and they need agenda items. So they'll create changes, and many of them are minute. They're not a required thing, but they'll say, well, we've had some input, maybe we ought to do this. And there's been several decisions they've made where they went one direction for a training period, and then shortly, several weeks later, they go a different direction. It could be completely polar opposite, because they tried it, it didn't work, or they didn't like the result, and so they decided to go another direction. But because they keep having these middle management training meetings, they feel like they have to have agenda items for that meeting. Right now, these meetings are happening every other month, and they bring all their middle management together, and they have a full 2-hour agenda, and they go through changes every time, and then those changes come down through the rest of the organization, and they are constantly talking the higher management about how come nobody ever gets it? How come the water never gets to the end of the row? And the problem is there's so much water that everybody's getting flooded, and it's killing the plants, if you will. First of all, do we even need to have middle management meetings? If there's an executive level looking at things and trying to evaluate, sometimes just to give it time to grow, give it time, evaluate it, that kind of stuff, but don't keep changing it. Changes really should only happen when there's something that's not working right. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't be nimble and be able to make course corrections, but sometimes those course corrections can be done just with an email rather than having a middle management meeting where we've got to bring everybody in and everybody's expecting, okay, what's the next 2 months worth of changes so we can take it back, because some people aren't in the office during those 2 months. They're out on the road, they're doing other work, that kind of stuff. And so if they miss that meeting, they don't know about the changes. And if the changes change and then they come back, by the time they get back, they don't even know there was a change. That's another thing I think that's important with change, is to evaluate, is this a longitudinal change that we want to make that will keep going in this direction because it benefits the company? Or is this a thing we're going to just throw out there, try it for this week and see what happens and maybe change it again? Course corrections, again, are good, but not constant to just have changes to make changes.
I've been blessed in my career to know a lot of people who've been in particular companies for a long time, and they've shared with me, perhaps a dozen that I've talked to, have shared this exact story with me where they see an idea that goes through 25 revisions before it ever is actually implemented. And what actually is implemented then gets deprecated, and then the idea comes back in a couple years later, and it's the same thing over and over. And the lesson that I've walked away from that is there's typically not a decision that's so big that it requires this much deliberation. Most of the time, the most effective decisions happen when they're quick, they're agile, they can be implemented, feedback can happen, and they can just be improved upon, as opposed to this belief, I'll say this false belief, that by spending all of this time revising and improving, it's going to come out perfectly. And it just never will. In fact, many times it will be deprecated and someone else will try it all over again. And so I see a lot of this analysis paralysis in all of the work that I've done. And I think one of the most helpful tools that I've heard was from a previous company. They talked about two different types of decisions. One that's a lot more large scale and one that's a lot more small scale. And with a large scale decision, they basically refer to it as a decision where you can't come back from it without heavy repercussions. Those are the decisions where we really need to be deliberate up front and think about methodically what were the risks? What are the opportunities? What can we do to overcome it? We go through all of that deliberating up front, but at the same time, once we've defined the timeline of when we'll make that decision, we stick to that decision. And we say, if we're going to take 3 weeks to plan this, then at the end of those 3 weeks, there's no more going back to the drawing board. We're going to implement it and we're going to learn from it. And we're going to trust that the work we've put in is meaningful work. And then with the small scale decisions, we understand that those have very little repercussions, or the repercussions are manageable and won't hurt anyone in a significant way. And so with those, we really don't need to be going back to the drawing board. But so many times I see, especially in that second case, that small scale decision, I see so many people do exactly what you just said. They go back to the drawing board before the decision is made and they say, oh, well, let's add this person in for consultation, or let's look at this perspective and let's tweak it in this way, or all these roadblocks that prevent the decision from ever happening. And it's like the best way we're going to learn is by doing. And then we get feedback and we can always improve, and no one is going to be impacted in a negative manner. Rather, we're going to move faster and we're going to have better feedback as a result.
Joseph Smith said, I teach them correct principles and let them govern themselves. And it seems like this is a great example as far as change. If we teach correct principles and go by a principle base at leadership level, then those who are not in leadership but are executing what it is we're teaching can do those things based within the parameters that they have. We did an earlier podcast or another podcast on micromanagement. And this is a great example. Organizations that continually change or continually roll stuff out back and forth are really micromanaging. And it really is much better to teach high-level principles, talk about the whys of why we're doing these kind of things where there's questions, but not get into all the weeds of the whats as far as this is how you need to do it, you need to do it this way, and all that kind of stuff. Otherwise, again, people won't have the ability to be creative, nor will they even understand why they're doing what they do. I remember another great story about a medicine man who went to a doctor to get medical help, and when the medicine man went to the doctor, he asked him if he danced, and he was referring to the dances that they did on the reservation. And as he taught him more about the dance, the doctor said, well, can you teach me to dance? And he said, well, I can teach you to dance, but you have to hear the music. And so in this same way, the principles are the music. As we understand that and we understand the principles, then we hear the music and we're much better able to do the dance. And while the dance may look different, we're able to do the dance. And the dance then becomes more organizationally based in enhancing what we're trying to do. Even in our own families, if we hear the music, we have an environment where people feel comfortable, they feel trusted, and they feel like they're clear on what's expected, and they're loved, if you will, in that relationship, then they're going to be much more able to dance. But if they feel like they're just being told what to do, they hear no music, then they're just dancing, which always will feel awkward, and it will feel like we're being forced to do it, and it's not something that we'll actually want to do. Thank you for tuning into today's episode, and be sure to check out our other episodes where we explore additional ways to enrich your relationships at work and with your family.
Before you take off, we invite you to subscribe and share what you liked from this episode with friends, colleagues, and family. Take a moment and share feedback and suggestions with us directly at enrichrelationshipspodcast@gmail.com.
Lasting change comes from enriching your relationships both at work and at home.